How much faith do you have? Well, in the next 7 minutes, I hope to cast some light on that important subject. Hi, my name is MarkBeingHuman, and this is my channel, MarkBeingHuman. And through union with God, union with one another, and a creative purpose, we're about discovering the full human experience. As far as I can see, there are two occasions where Jesus speaks about great faith. One is to the centurion when he heals his servant, and the second one is to the Syrophoenician woman, or the Canaanite woman, or the Gentile woman who comes pressing Jesus when he's eating a meal with his friends. And he responds to her by saying, "How great is your faith?" On the other hand, there are at least two occasions that I can find where Jesus speaks about how small is your faith. The one occasion is after Peter has attempted to walk on the water, or has walked on the water. They get back to the boat and Jesus says to him, "Why did you doubt? How small is your faith?" The second incident is in the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, "Why do you worry about what you shall eat or what you shall drink? Don't you know your Father knows that you have need of these things? Where is your faith? How small is your faith?" The interesting thing about this question is that we aren't the only people who speak about how great is your faith. In fact, the disciples come to Jesus in Luke chapter 17 verses 5 through 6, and they say to him, and this is what the scriptures say, the apostles said to the Lord, "Show us how to increase our faith." The Lord answered, now listen to the answer, "If you had the faith even as small as a mustard seed, you could say to this mulberry tree, may you be uprooted and be planted in the sea, and it would obey you." It seems to me that Jesus doesn't even actually answer the question. The question is, how can we increase our faith? You see, I think that the disciples are thinking about faith the way I've often thought about faith, and until recently began to think about it in a different way. They thought about it in a linear way. Small faith, great faith. It's a little bit like this. Boom. I've seen people do this on Instagram. I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to see if I can edit something in there. Anyway, as I was saying, the disciples say to Jesus, "Increase our faith." And in my mind, the disciples have a similar view, or let me say, I have a similar view to what the disciples' view was. So if we have to say there's a linear line of faith, 0 is I have no faith, 10 is I have faith that I walk in water in my spare time, that there's this kind of linear experience to faith. And what the disciples are saying, and what I have said, "Lord, increase my faith. If I'm a 4, Lord, increase my faith to a 6. But when I read the scriptures, and particularly this verse in the book of 1 Timothy chapter 3 verse 16, which says this, "Without question, this is the great mystery of our faith. Christ was revealed in a human body and vindicated by the Spirit. He was seen by angels and announced to the nations. He was believed in throughout the world and taken to heaven in glory." So when I read the scripture, I see something mystical, something different about faith. And the way I describe it is as follows. First of all, let me say this. Faith is not a commodity. It's not something we possess or that we own. What it actually is, I think, is an atmosphere in which we exist as Christians. For example, we exist in this atmosphere. We call it oxygen, or we call it air. Oxygen, or whatever you want to call it. And we have the ability in our bodies to breathe in our lungs in some way that take the air from the outside and kind of process it through us so that oxygen goes into every part of our body and we are alive. Now, what we know with the oxygen and with the air in this atmosphere is that when we exercise, when we apply effort to our physical being, that we use up more oxygen, we become tired, our pulse rate begins to go up. Now, I think there's a similarity between the way in which oxygen works and atmosphere works and the way in which grace works. So instead of seeing grace as something that is quantified linearly, for me grace is an atmosphere, alright, grace, in which faith comes alive. Jesus sends grace down to us, He gives us grace, and we respond back in faith. It's like faith is the response to grace. So God provides an atmosphere. It's in this whole world. Just as we can't see the oxygen we believe, we can't necessarily see the grace, but Timothy has told us already that this grace is mystical. And this grace enables us, our faith, to exist and for us to believe and to express faith that is directed towards the source of grace, which of course is Jesus Himself. There come times in our lives where, as it were, when we exercise, we in a sense breathe harder, we suck in more air. There are times in our lives where in a way we breathe harder, difficult times, times of challenge, where we in a sense we have to suck in more grace with the faith to get through a particular season of our lives. There are other times when, in a sense, we're more at rest, where our faith is not being so activated. Nevertheless, it still exists within the grace of God. So what I'm really saying is that instead of faith being something linear that we add to it, it goes more on the level of different stages of life. So for example, the Canaanite woman who Jesus said has great faith, her pulse rate, her need for the grace of God is so high because of her daughter's situation that she's drawing on all of God's grace. And Jesus refers to her as, you have great faith. Whereas maybe for Peter, when he's in this situation, he starts out knowing that what he's doing is supernatural, but as he begins to shift his attention away from the source of grace, Jesus, he begins to become overwhelmed, and as it were, he almost runs out of air. And Jesus helps him back, and that's the great story of grace. It's undeserved, it's unmerited. Jesus is the source of grace, and faith is the way by which we internalize God's grace to us. Just as our bodies, the organs in our bodies internalize the air that we breathe that gives us life. And I think just like in real life where you can hold your breath, I think people hold their faith, and if you do it long enough you faint or you die. I think sometimes they are like fainting Christians, because it's as if there is nothing brought to bear that demands that they believe. So that's my thought about faith. I hope it makes sense to you. If it does, hey, I'd love you to share this with somebody else. Subscribe to my channel and ask a question by writing your question in the area below here. Or you can drop me an email at MarkBeingHuman57@gmail.com. God bless you. Have a great day.